Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Liven show. So, Peter, welcome to the Liven show. It's a pleasure to have you, really, and a privilege.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we've been planning this for a while. I'm glad we finally got to make it and then, get to interview you. How are you? How is Nigeria right now?
Yeah, I'm fine. Nigeria is doing good. We're in the process of, context. Everybody trying to, preach their, what's it called, context person who you want to vote for, etc. And so we're fine here.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, today we are talking about your book, Faith in the Dungeon of Doom. And I wanted, first of all, to get to know you. I know you personally, but our viewers out there don't know who you are. Can you please explain a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing in Nigeria and globally?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I am a Nigerian writer. I'm a book reviewer, and I have a YouTube channel, English Literature, where I review books and conduct interviews with authors around the world. I'm a poet. I'm a literary critic, and I just love to say something about myself in the literary sense. So that's what I basically do. And I'm the author of 6 poetry collection, though the ones that are currently out are 4 books. So the other ones are like a book series, which is coming up, in the next month and the next 2 months. So I am so excited to be here, like I said earlier on. So it's really a pleasure on my part.
Great to have you here. So how did you start as a writer? Have you always, thought about writing when you were very, very little?
Oh, no, I haven't really. I never even thought of becoming a writer for, during my early years. It's not something that that I've wanted to do. It's not something that I have in my mind. So the journey of becoming a writer actually is something that started, all of a sudden, and I can remember. And back then in 2019, because that's when I actually started writing. That's in September 2019. That's when I first compiling my first novel together, Etean's Ecstasy. And the journey of becoming a writer is actually a fun thing to me. Sometimes when I look back and realize, how did I even become a writer? I'm like, okay, I can't really, deduct or remember in particular I became a writer, but it's something that just comes to me. And looking back, I just started with writing poems, writing articles, and developing my stories together, putting them together. And the journey started going, and from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, it started expanding. So it's pretty much a nice thing, and it's a very great journey, and I'm really admiring it.
What was your first book?
Yeah, my first book was Etean's Destiny. It's somewhere far over there in the shelf. I would have bring it along. And it's titled Etean's Destiny. It was published in 2020 September, and that is just like it's a collection of poems that I've written within a period of a year thereabout, and I had it published. So there actually isn't a particular theme talked about in Etean in Ecstasy of the Dead. It's actually a collection of poems that talks about the human issue, because I love writing poems about human condition.
Your poetry reads like poems from the Bible sometimes, but also they are philosophically engaging. How do you, or where do you get that background? Are you trained as a philosopher? Were you trained in that field?
I wasn't trained in the field of philosophy. Philosophy itself, like looking into it, is like the field of wisdom, knowledge. The word philosophy, lovers of wisdom, lovers of knowledge. And well, I know I'm a Christian, but most of my poems, like you said, are biblical. I've heard quite a lot of people say that, but I don't love to make it too biblical, and that's why I love to add a bit of philosophy, because I don't want to write for a certain audience. I don't want my book to be meant for a particular audience. I always try my possible best to make it something that is accessible to everybody, irrespective of a religion, your belief, your long-held intuition, etc. And I just love it that way. And talking about the background, where I get a background to making either of my poem philosophical and biblical, is like something that comes to me unexpectedly. Is, as I keep hearing the words in my ear and I pen them down, whatever comes to me is what I'm going to write down. I don't actually make it that philosophical or biblical. As it comes to me, I pen them down. And I wouldn't say I don't have any background whatsoever in philosophy, but it's once you start writing, you get to realize that you're writing out a bit of philosophy, because sometimes when the word comes to me and when I write them down, I'm like, wow, this is actually full of wisdom. It's something, when you read a particular lyric, it's something that you can read and meditate on it for some little while before you move to the next lyrics. And even when the words actually comes to me, like in the point of writing it, I thought so, like I'm always very intrigued about it. Despite that, I don't have any background in philosophy, but you can always create something out of you. You can create something out of yourself. And I don't have a background in philosophy, but you can make philosophy out of your thinking, out of your imagination, out of whatsoever you write up. And that's how I come about that.
And you have to read a lot, because you've read so many books in 1 year. I guess 99 books.
Well, none of those books are in the genre of philosophy. Most of them are like novels, poetry, every genres. But most of them are not really in the genre of philosophy. I've been wanting to read book in the genre of philosophy, like talk about The Meditation by Mark Aurelius, talk about other books in the genre of philosophy, but I don't have the time. Like, I've been wanting to gain from their ocean of knowledge, but I've been wanting to do that. I think it's something I'd love to do later on. But I just love to form words of my own self, of my own imagination, of my own intuition, of my own knowledge, and put it together. So reading from all the books wouldn't be a source of. I haven't really read much of philosophical book, but I have produced one. So, and sometimes the inspiration comes to me in a manner that sometimes can be very surprising to me.
The way society views a writer, I'm speaking this for the young ones who want to write, but are afraid to get started, right? The way society views a writer, they view him as something of, like unreachable. It's like writing is an unattainable goal, right? They view a writer outside of society's premises. How does that reflect on you? Like, what do you think about that notion of a writer as someone who is doing his work so much isolated from society, and you're kind of looking back on society, from somewhere above? You are basically looking down on society, and then you're writing about it.
Do you mean about? I don't get your question very well. I'm sorry about that.
So I want us to talk about the picture of a writer in a society, like the representation of a writer in a society, and the way societies views a writer, especially. Can you speak on that in the context of yourself, also in the context of famous writers in Nigeria, and also in the context of how you saw a writer before you started writing?
Absolutely. I love that now. Now I understand your question. Well, I think writers have a very good, I use the word notation, or they have a good image in the face of the society. Like in Nigeria, we value writers very well. Talk about people like Wole Soyinka, people like Chinua Achebe, who is dead, and quite a lot of other people, Ben Okri, name them. We have quite a lot of them. And I think they have a very good image in the face of the society. And that's admixed those people who are educated. It's to construct things. Somebody who doesn't know what you are doing, who doesn't see the value in your work, cannot, have a kind of a good respect for you. But in a Nigerian context, I think the image of a writer is a one that is very good, one that is very imitable, and one that most people, the upcoming writers, are looking forward to see. Like sometimes I imagine myself that, I'd love to be a Chinua Achebe in the future time. I'd love to be the African, one of the best writers in Africa in future time, because those people who have gone before us have laid a good, foundation for us. They've laid a good example, wanting every other person to follow. That reminds me, I remember watching a video of Wole Soyinka, and the interviewer asking him that, has he found anybody in maybe Nigeria or other African country who can take up his position as a Nobel laureate? Everybody have their own limelight. Everybody have their own style to, pave their way up to the top front. So I think the society actually views writer very well in Nigeria. They have a good reputation for them, even though education is something that is going down the drain nowadays. Talking about the reality of take for instance the strike that have been going on in Nigeria. Have been going on for the past 7 months, where you have the gate of university shut down for good 7 months and counting. So it's not a good, it's not promoting, literature, is not promoting education that well. But I'd mix everything. We still view, writers in a very good, especially the most famous, notable, prestigious ones, like people like Soyinka. We view them in a very good, and they actually have good impact when it comes to the roles they've got to play in society. Is a great one in terms of politics, in terms of every aspect of human life, in human activities, etc. They've been a good point picker and everything there. So we always have a good way of viewing writers here in the society, especially in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about this book in particular, Fate in the Dungeons of Doom. How has it contributed to society, or what is the message contained herein?
Yeah, Fate in the Dungeon of Doom, it's actually, it's a very contemplative, it's an introspective literature question of how it has contributed to society. Well, it's actually, my theme of, what's it called, poetry is about the human condition. And in the human condition, you can talk about fate because everybody actually have fate. Everybody has a fate, have a destiny of life attached to them, which sometimes can be spiritual and can be a making of ourselves. So in Fate in the Dungeon of Doom, the first section, like it has 3 sections. The first section talks about the poems of fate, and the second section talks about the poems of Kohame, and the third section talks about all the breathtaking poems. So in Fate, I sat down because I always love to think, I love to imagine and, paint image in a very way that is even far beyond my imagination. And I was asking questions concerning the human fate. I sat down and I began to have imagination. I began to think about the reality of destiny. What is destiny itself? What is fate? Is fate a making of ourselves or an anonymous destination? Can a man ask power to control his own fate? Is fate something like an ordained path for a man, irrespective of how hard it tries to change some certain thing in his life? Is fate, a predetermined? Is it like a permanent stuff where it cannot be changed? And my contemplation make me to imagine every other aspect of life, because we have different persons in humanity. We have those who are famous, we have those who are poor, we have those with high influence, we have those who are not known, we have different section in life. And I began to ask myself about the fate of a man. Does man have power to control his own fate? Do we as humans even know our own fate? Like, is fate a making of ourselves? Is it like a path that we must go through, or is a destination that is not known unto us? And there, the poem was told from the perception of a typical, a sad, a despondent character. and a narrator who doesn't really have, like most people say in review, who doesn't have a good end. So it's actually written in the perception of a tortured soul who is now asking questions about his own fate, about destiny, waiting to meet fate, waiting to meet destiny, waiting to meet fame, waiting to meet fortune, and all of that. And this is something that I think is relatable to every human being, because I love talking about the human condition. Like I said earlier on, most of my poems are centered on the human issue. This talk about obstacle, that talk about fate and a woman with a missing son. The other one talk about spiritual impediment and how some spiritual and all that sort of title, which is all a composition of life. Then in the second section, I talked about the poems of Kohame, The Fate of a Traumatized Lad, which is a story of a young Nigerian boy gone missing and the aftermath of the reverberation of his missing over his mother, Vanessa, and his family members. And, here, like I've actually had someone said, a reviewer in the United States said, she could resonate very well with it. And another person also made mention that, the poem of Kohame is like a look into the life of many other people. Well, I do not know. I don't have that in mind, but I was writing it anyway. I was just telling a story